Let's take a moment to transport ourselves back to the humid, suffocating dawn of August 14, 1943, specifically at 6:47 a.m., where Marine Corporal James Jimmy Castellano found himself crouched low in the muck of a foxhole on Vella La Vella Island, the air heavy with the metallic scent of blood and the rotting vegetation of the South Pacific jungle. He was surrounded by the cooling bodies of 3 fellow Marines who, just 12 hours prior, had been breathing, joking and cleaning their gear, but who now lay dead, each victim to a single surgically placed bullet hole in the head. There had been no telltale muzzle flash to give away the enemy's position, no cracking report of a rifle until it was too late, just the silent, terrifying arrival of death from somewhere deep within the impenetrable green canopy above. In the 6 weeks that followed this grim morning, Castellano would embark on a solitary crusade that would see him eliminate 22 Imperial Japanese snipers, achieving this grim tally using a weapon that the Marine Corps had never issued him, employing a stalking technique that his commanding officer had explicitly forbidden, and utilizing a reservoir of patience that would eventually transform him into a ghost story, whispered in reverence and fear across the Pacific theater. This is the untold history of how a scrap-fighting street kid from Brooklyn, armed with nothing more than a mail-order hunting rifle and his own wits, fundamentally altered the trajectory of jungle warfare forever. At the time, the Marine Corps leadership often viewed men like Castellano as bordering on suicidal because they voluntarily undertook the most perilous assignment in the entire Pacific campaign, counter-sniper operations. The Japanese snipers they faced were masters of their craft, killing with a terrifying surgical precision that specifically targeted high-value individuals, officers, radio men, and medics, from distances that rendered standard American retaliation tactics utterly impossible. By that fateful August in 1943, Marine casualties attributed solely to sniper fire had skyrocketed to a staggering 34% in certain sectors of jungle operations, a statistic that was decimating morale. The standard American military protocol for dealing with such threats was blunt and often ineffective, demanding massive artillery strikes or the deployment of flamethrowers to incinerate suspected sniper hides, solutions that not only destroyed valuable intelligence and revealed American positions to the enemy, but often accomplished absolutely nothing, because the elusive sniper had already slipped away into the foliage. Castellano knew the futility of these tactics better than most because he had watched them fail time and time again, often at the cost of his friends' lives. James Castellano was a product of the hard streets of Red Hook, Brooklyn, a neighborhood where the industrial docks bled into the tenements, and where every city block was governed by its own brutal hierarchy of violence. His father had broken his back working the shipping yards, loading cargo for 16 hours a day for meager wages that barely kept a roof over their heads, and watching that struggle taught Jimmy to fight not with the disciplined grace of a boxer in a gym, but with the scrappy, survivalist instinct of a street brawler using broken bottles and chain-link fences as his arena. He was a small, wiry kid, possessing hands that moved faster than his mouth, but his true gift, the one that would define his war, was his ability to watch, to read the chaotic patterns of the street, and to predict where trouble would emerge before it actually arrived. At the age of 14, he began working weekends at Rossi's Auto Repair, where he disassembled engines and learned the intimate language of mechanical failure. But it was at 16 that he discovered the physiological trait that separated him from every other kid in Red Hook. He possessed a preternatural visual acuity, the ability to see details at extreme distances that others simply missed, like a pigeon landing 3 blocks away, or a face in a 4th-floor window, a talent his friends found unsettling, but which Jimmy pragmatically termed useful. In 1941, driven less by a sense of patriotic fervor than by the grim certainty that the shipping yards would eventually crush him just as they had his father, he enlisted in the military before Pearl Harbor even happened. Viewing the Marine Corps as his escape route, they issued him the standard M1 Garand, trained him to shoot at stationary targets at a predictable 300 yards, and shipped him off to Guadalcanal in January 1943, where the brutal reality of the jungle quickly taught him that formal target practice meant absolutely nothing in the chaos of actual combat. The lessons were written in blood, beginning with Marine Sergeant Robert McKenna, who died on February 3, 1943, at 1:15 p.m., shot through the left eye, while trying to direct mortar fire against a Japanese machine gun nest. The sniper had fired from a hidden position in the banyan trees, some 400 yards north, and although American artillery plastered the area for 20 minutes in retaliation, they found no body, no blood trail, and no spent cartridge. McKenna had been more than just a squad leader to Castellano. He was an Oklahoma farm kid who had mentored Jimmy on how to read the jungle, how to distinguish the calls of native birds from Japanese signals, and how to move through the dense vegetation without disturbing the visual pattern of the leaves, and they had even planned to open a garage together in Tulsa after the war. A dream that ended when Castellano helped carry McKenna's lifeless body back to the aid station. Then there was Corporal Thomas Chen, who died on February 19th, shot through the throat at 7:20 a.m. while distributing ammunition, another single shot from an unknown distance that artillery failed to avenge. Chen, who had grown up in San Francisco's Chinatown and spoke 3 languages, was a technical wizard who could fix any radio the Marines possessed. Once even jury-rigging Castellanos shorted out walkie-talkie during a monsoon, spending 4 hours in the driving rain to restore their communication line. The toll continued to mount with Private First Class Anthony Russo, who died on March 8 during a patrol, killed instantly by a bullet to the temple as he knelt to refill his canteen. Russo was a 19-year-old from South Philly who had promised his mother he would take care of himself, keeping her letters in a waterproof pouch he read every night. Castellano had been walking merely 6 feet behind him when it happened, hearing the wet crack of the impact, like a branch snapping, before the sound of the gunshot even arrived, watching as Russo's body slumped into the stream and turned the water pink while the sniper vanished like smoke. By June 1943, having witnessed 11 men die in this exact manner, the pattern became horrifyingly clear to Castellano. Japanese snipers were operating from extreme ranges, often 600 to 800 yards, using specialized rifles with high-quality telescopic sights, positioning themselves high in the canopy to wait for targets of opportunity, firing once, and then immediately relocating. American doctrine was impotent against this. The M1 Garand had an effective range of only about 500 yards with iron sights, and even the Springfield 1903 sniper rifles available to the Marines maxed out around 600 yards with any real accuracy. The Japanese simply had better equipment and better training for this environment, and Marines were dying because the institution refused to adapt to this reality. Castellano tried to bring this to the attention of Lieutenant Harrison on June 12, after yet another radio man was killed during a river crossing, but Harrison, a West Point graduate who lived by the book, was convinced that Marine Corps doctrine represented the pinnacle of military wisdom, and listened to Castellano with the condescending patience one might show a tantrum-throwing child. When Harrison insisted that the M1903 was within specification, and that they would stick to the doctrine of suppressive fire and maneuver rather than individual heroics, Castellano pushed back, arguing that specification doesn't mean when the target's 200 yards outside our effective range, and that doctrine was getting Marines killed. Harrison dismissed him with a threat of disciplinary action for undermining morale, leaving Castellano with the chilling realization that the lieutenant would never change his mind, and that more Marines would inevitably die unless someone did something the Marine Corps wouldn't approve of. That something arrived in a nondescript package from Brooklyn on July 2, 1943, sent by Castellano's younger brother Vincent, who worked at a sporting goods store in Manhattan. In May, Jimmy had written to him asking about civilian hunting rifles with long-range capabilities, and Vincent had responded by sending a Winchester Model 70, pre-war production, chambered in the powerful .3006 Springfield cartridge, and fitted with a Lyman 4X scope. Vincent had purchased it from an estate sale for $87.50 and shipped it through civilian postal channels labeled as machine parts to avoid military censors. When Castellano opened the package in his tent late at night, knowing that possession of an unauthorized weapon was a court-martial offense, he held the rifle that weighed 8.8 pounds heavier than the Garand with a 5-round internal magazine and a bolt-action mechanism that required manual cycling, and he knew that while the slow follow-up shots contradicted the Marine philosophy of overwhelming firepower, the weapon gave him the one thing he desperately needed: effective range. The Winchester Model 70 could reach out to 800 yards with proper ammunition and shooter skill, giving him parity, or perhaps even superiority over the Japanese sniper rifles due to Winchester's superior pre-war manufacturing standards. However, owning the rifle was one thing. Using it without being caught and imprisoned at Leavenworth for violating the Uniform Code of Military Justice was another. He wrestled with the decision for 3 nights, but the turning point came on July 5, when Private Daniel O'Connor, an 18-year-old from Boston, who wanted to be a teacher, was shot through the chest while smoking a cigarette during a rest break. The sniper had fired from at least 700 yards away, and as O'Connor bled out in Castellano's arms, apologizing for staining Jimmy's uniform, the hesitation evaporated. At 2:15 a.m., on July 6, Castellano sat in his tent with the Winchester disassembled, the smell of gun oil and jungle humidity mixing in the air, preparing the weapon with a stash of 50 rounds of .3006 M2 ball ammunition he had traded cigarettes for with a Navy supply clerk. He had test-fired the weapon only once at dawn 2 days prior, confirming the scope held 0, and now he cleaned the barrel with meticulous care until the patches came out white, torqued the scope rings with a borrowed multi-tool, and prepared himself to operate alone, violating direct orders to stalk Japanese snipers in their own element. He wrapped the rifle in a poncho, hid it beneath his cot, and didn't sleep, knowing that the next day he would test if a Brooklyn street kid could outkill professionally trained hunters. The opportunity arose 2 days later during a standard patrol to secure a trail junction, led by Sergeant Paul Whitmore, a Guadalcanal veteran. Castellano carried the Winchester wrapped in burlap with his M1 slung over his back as a decoy. When the patrol stopped for a water break at a creek crossing at 8:47 a.m., Castellano moved away from the group and unwrapped the rifle, pretending to clean it. Suddenly, at 8:53 a.m., a shot rang out, striking Marine Private Lewis Grant in the chest and killing him instantly. The patrol scrambled for cover, firing blindly into the jungle 400 yards away, but Castellano remained motionless, scanning the canopy for the muzzle flash or movement that would reveal the sniper's position. Japanese snipers typically fired from elevated platforms 15 to 30 feet up, using the foliage as concealment, and standard doctrine dictated they would move or wait for artillery. Castellano broke protocol, moving 20 yards into the jungle to find a clear sightline, and waited, knowing the sniper would expect the Americans to withdraw and call in artillery, a process that took at least 20 minutes. He settled into a sniper's trance, slowing his heart rate and narrowing his focus, until at 9:19 a.m., he detected movement in the canopy, 620 yards to the northeast, not wind, but the deliberate shift of weight as a sniper climbed down from his perch. The Japanese soldier, confident the Americans had retreated, was descending slowly, wearing a ghillie suit and carrying an Arisaka Type 97 sniper rifle. Castellano adjusted his scope, calculating the windage and elevation for the 620-yard shot, and as the sniper paused 20 feet above the ground, Jimmy exhaled and squeezed the trigger. The Winchester cracked, the bullet traversing the distance in 0.7 seconds to strike the sniper in the chest, punching through both lungs. The man fell backward, crashing through the branches to hit the ground with a thud, audible from 600 yards away. Castellano cycled the bolt, watched for a backup, and when none appeared, he wrapped his rifle and rejoined the patrol, saying nothing. 3 days later, another patrol found the dead sniper, and intelligence officers, baffled, attributed the death to unknown friendly fire, perhaps artillery fragmentation, filing a report that sat ignored on a desk. Castellano killed his second sniper on July 14 during a reconnaissance mission, taking out a target 780 yards away, who had pinned down the approach to a river valley. He had hiked a mile through the jungle to get the angle, fired once and returned. Word began to spread through the ranks, first with Marine Sergeant Mike Torres, who witnessed Castellano drop a sniper from 690 yards on July 22 and confronted him about the weapon. When Torres learned the truth, that it was a personal hunting rifle from Brooklyn, he didn't report Jimmy. Instead, he arranged for supply personnel to quietly provide him with more ammunition. By the end of the week, 5 different squad leaders were off the books requesting Castellano's presence on patrols in sniper-heavy zones. Lieutenant Harrison noticed the dramatic drop in casualties from 6 in June to 1 in late July, but attributed it to enhanced vigilance, never investigating further. The Japanese, however, were quicker to realize something had changed. Veteran sniper Corporal Takeshi Hayashi reported surviving a near miss from an American marksman with exceptional range on August 3, and soon Japanese intelligence was noting that American marksmanship had improved impossibly in specific sectors. They began referring to the ghost in radio intercepts, avoiding certain ridgelines and crossings where their snipers simply vanished. By September 1, Castellano had 22 confirmed kills recorded in his secret notebook, with his longest shot being 847 yards and his shortest 412. He had single-handedly reduced Marine casualties from sniper fire in his area by 67%, saving an estimated 40 to 60 lives directly. The secret finally broke on September 8, when a logistics officer discovered the unauthorized Winchester during a routine inventory and filed a report that landed on Harrison's desk. Harrison summoned Castellano for a confrontation that lasted 4 minutes, With the rifle lying on the desk like evidence, Harrison rattled off the regulations and the threat of court-martial. But when Castellano admitted to 22 confirmed kills, the lieutenant's demeanor shifted from anger to a stunned realization. He inspected the superior quality of the Winchester, acknowledged that division intelligence had misattributed the drop in casualties, and listened as Castellano explained that he broke the rules because Marines were dying, and nobody with authority was doing anything to stop it. In a moment of moral clarity, Harrison handed the rifle back, ordering Castellano to write a report on his tactics and to train 2 other Marines, promising to protect him from the brass as long as the weapon remained a secret. Castellano wrote the report, documenting range estimation, wind reading, and positioning, and trained Corporals Torres and Reed, leading to the quiet authorization of Springfield sniper rifles for their units. Although no official doctrine was rewritten immediately, the techniques spread informally across the South Pacific, reversing the sniper-kill ratio from favoring the Japanese 3-1 to favoring the Americans 2-1 by mid-1944. Castellano received no medals, no commendations, and was eventually assigned to a training rotation where he taught basic marksmanship without ever mentioning the Winchester. He finished the war as a sergeant with only 12 officially recorded kills, despite his private notebook listing 37 sniper kills between 1943 and 1945. He returned to Brooklyn in October 1945, worked as a machinist, married and raised a family in Red Hook, keeping the rifle locked away and his story hidden even from his children. James Castellano died in 1987, his obituary mentioning only that he served with distinction, but the tactical revolution he started lived on, codified in the modern scout sniper doctrine of the Marine Corps, used in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan, principles of patience and position discipline, developed by a lone corporal with a mail-order rifle. He was a man who understood that the true cost of war isn't just death, but the burden of knowing you did what was necessary, while the institution filed reports, and that the only reward worth a damn isn't a medal on your chest, but the fact that 40 Marines got to go home to their families because a kid from Red Hook decided their lives were worth more than his career. If you found this story compelling, please like this video, subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories, and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from.